Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa. Today we're going to start on a new stitch series in our sampler project. We're working our way alphabetically through some of the stitches that are really great for crazy quilting in this sampler series. We have 4 weeks of Chevron Stitch coming. This is a stitch that's great for crazy quilts. You see it in many of the vintage quilts as well as many of the modern ones. It's been one of my favorites because I think there's a lot you can do with it. It's really a straight stitch pattern, and so if you keep that in mind, we don't have any interlocking stitches, so that will make it very different than the buttonhole or the chain stitches that we've been working on in the past. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a 5-seam block in my frame. I have all of my threads chosen already. We're going to start on this seam here, and we're going to stitch a basic chevron stitch. This is a stitch that I don't usually mark, but I'm going to mark it in case that's something that you need, and you'll be able to see how to do it. I also want to share something about this block. I want you to notice how horizontal this is. It's nearly parallel to my outside edge. That's something I usually try and avoid, and if I had done this block over again, I would have angled it up slightly. But it happens occasionally. It'll work great for this chevron stitch, which is a very geometric stitch. I want to think about how wide I want it and also how far apart I want my stitches. Now this one, the markings on the 2 lines are actually going to be offset from one another. My seam is 3 inches long. We're going to make this one really easy. We're going to make marks at our 1/2 inch mark. And that will take us right out all the way. We can always go a little further, but we're not going to because we're going to end up out there. Now we need to think about how wide we want it. If we do 1/2 inch, that's a pretty steep stitch. So I'm thinking I'm going to make these about 3/8 of an inch high. So I'm just going to draw a line across here. And then we started, we'll say on that seam line with that. And I'm going to come in and mark at 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to move it over so my 1/2 inch mark is on that line, and then I'm going to mark 1/2 inch the rest of the way across, and that should fall halfway in between the marks we've made on the other side of the block. When you're doing chevron stitch, the variations on this are almost all to do with spacing. So I want you to think the height of your stitch, the width of your stitch. That will also vary the angles of your stitch. We're going to start this one over here because I'm right-handed. I tend to work it from left to right. This is going to be the center dot here. Normally we would be extending over and putting a little cap on top of each of those marks. I'm going to come out, and I'm not going quite 1/8 of an inch. It's a little less than that. And that's going to be 1/2 of a cap. I'm going to come back up at that mark. And now this is going to be a straight stitch that comes down to our mark in between. So we're going to go down at that mark. And now I'm going to come back up and I'm going to put my cap on this triangle. So I'm coming up a little ways to the left. And now I'm going to go down. I'm going to have a width of thread here, so I want to go down just a little further on the other side to make that cap look nice and even. Now before I pull that tight, I can fold it back so I know where to come up, and then as I come up, I'll pull my cap tight. And now I've got a nice even cap sitting on top of that triangle. Now we're going to go down on the top at our mark. So when I'm doing this on a seam edge like this, I'm going to actually go over that piece into the next piece for this one. That helps bring the two together. Now I'm coming up to the left of where I went down, And then I'm going to think about my thread width and go over as much as I did here on this side. So it's a little exaggerated on that side to allow for that thread width. Got a little twist. So there's my cap. Now let me show you. If I pull that cap tight, it's a little harder to see where I'm going. I can still do it. I can just sort of roll it aside with my finger and then come up right next to where I went down. And then I can pull tight and that will flatten that cap out. So now we're going to come down on this mark. We're going to come up to the left. We're going to make our cap exaggerating a little bit to the other side to allow for the thickness of the thread. Come back up right next to that other tip of the triangle. Pull your cap tight. Now we're going to go up here and go down. Now we're coming up to the left of that. Going down to the right, exaggerating just slightly to allow for the width of the thread. Coming up right next to where we went down. Now we're going down at that dot. Coming up to the left. And these caps can be as big or as small as you would like. And we're going to play with some variations with that probably next week, actually, now that I think about it. Come up to the side. Go down the other side, exaggerating just a little bit. Come back up where you went down. Go down on your mark. Now we're coming up on the left side. Going over the other side just a little bit more. The width of a thread more. That's what helps it be symmetrical. Go down on the dot above. This one can go really fast. Once you get the hang of it, it's actually a fun stitch. I like it because it allows so many possibilities for things. You've got all these neat little platforms that you can add things to. And I'll show you some examples here of how I've used chevron stitch in the past. In fact, I'm going to show you a couple of the very early pieces that I did. And not only do you have the little platforms to use, but think about, you can do stuff in the center. You know, it's a good spot for a bead or a lazy daisy or a sequin. Just so many things you can do with it. So down on the right, come up right next to where you went down. But my mark is fading or it's blending into the other fabric there, one or the other, I can't quite tell. Coming up to the right, exaggerating a little bit, going down on the left, put a little cap on it, come up right next to where you went down, down on the opposite mark, up a little bit to the left, down a little bit further on the right. Try to come up right next to where you went down. And now we're going to go down, and our mark is right on the seam line. And to carry that stitch through, I'm going to go ahead and put my cap on. And I'm going to go ahead and just make the full cap there. And just in case that seam gets moved over, I'm going to make just a little short. I'm just going to match the parallel of that and stitch out into my seam allowance to carry it through in case the edge gets moved over slightly, because sometimes that happens. So there is a really basic chevron stitch. Let me knot that, and we'll take a look at the next stitch. For this next one, we're going to do it along here, and this time we're going to make a shallow one. So basically, the variations on chevron stitch have to do with the height of the stitch, the width of the stitch. We're going to make these stitches about 3/4 of an inch long on this, and that actually will get us 3 stitches on there. We're also going to go pretty shallow with this one, so I'm just going to draw my line across there. And if we're going 3/4 of an inch, I'm looking at where I'm at, so I need to be 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to just move that so I can get it in the middle here. Where's my dot? There it is. And there. Alright, so we got a dot, so we're going to go this way. And we're going to start off the same way. I'm going to start by making my half cap, since we're starting right on the seam there. This time I'm using a 3-stranded embroidery floss rather than pearl cotton. I'm also going to make these really big flat caps on this. And so we're going to come right back up here. And then we're going to stitch up to our dot on the top. I'm going to make really big ones, so these are going to be almost 3/8 of an inch across, I think, by the time we're said and done. 1/4 of an inch, I'm not sure. Coming up. It's exactly the same stitch that we've just stitched. It's just we're varying the height of it and the width of it, and we're putting big caps on it. I'm using embroidery floss, and I've got one loose strand, so my strands aren't quite pulling taut, so I need to figure out which strand is loose here. So I just have to sort of separate them out, and that was it. I got it the first try. That's unusual. And so I'm going to straighten it out. I'm going to bring my needle all the way down, and I'm going to bring it back out and straighten that thread out a little bit. Alright, now we're going to go wide all the way across here. Hold it up so I can see where I'm going. Come up right next to where I went down. Now we're going to go down on this dot. And again, we're going to make our big cap on it. Sometimes think it takes me longer to find the spot where I want to bring the needle up than it does to actually do the rest of the stitch. And I've got a twist in my thread on the back, so I'm just pulling it out, getting the twist out, and make my big cap, exaggerating a little bit over to the right. If you're left-handed and you're working the opposite direction, just reverse directions on your stitches. Down on the mark on the opposite side. Come up on the left. Go down exaggerated on the right. Up right next to where you went down. Now down on the upper mark. Again, I'm just going over that edge of that patch. Make my exaggerated cap. And like we did on the other one, I'm going to come out into my seam allowance and kind of finish it off. Just carry that pattern out just a little bit in case my seam moves slightly. So bring it out parallel to what I've done before. And there you have it. And so that's just a shallower one with a larger cap on it. Let me knot that. For our third variation on this, we're going to try one that's got a steep and narrow view, and I think we're going to do that one over here on this seam. That seam narrows down quite a bit in here. We'll see how we end up coping with that one. This one I'm going to keep my bases fairly narrow. I think we're going to go about, let's make them closer together. Let's go about 3/8 of an inch. We're starting here at the base there, and we're going to go 3/8 of an inch apart all the way across. So I'm just counting 3 segments on my little quilting ruler. And now we're going to make these really tall. I think that's our 3/4 inch line. I want to make sure I'm lined up on my seam. We could go really tall, but then we're really running into stuff. So I think let's go 3/4 of an inch. I think I'm happy with that. Now this one's going to be a little harder to mark. I'm just going to put my mark here. So there's my 3/8 inch marks lines up here. So if I'm going to go halfway in between, I want that to be in between, and so my marks are going to be there. So we're going to do the dots. I'm going to mark over in here even though I'm not going to stitch quite to that point, but it gives me a guideline. And we're going to mark down, and I'm going to mark all the way out into my seam down here because we're going to be stitching all the way out in here. I'm going to use this variegated embroidery floss that we've been using on each of the blocks. As before, I'm going to go ahead and start. Actually, let's think about this. I can do this one left-handed, so I'm going to start down here. I'm going to stitch with my right hand, but I'm going to do it in a left-handed direction for those of you who are left-handed. So I'm not going to put huge caps on these. It's going to be similar to this, but because we're working with a different thread, it will look like it has a little different size. So there's my mark. I don't really want to stitch over this seam. I'm going to hold it up here, and I'm only going to stitch to the seam. Now I'm going to put my needle in here, and I'm just going to mark with my finger where I need to come out along that seam to match my pattern properly. And we're going to come down here to that mark. Again, I'm stitching in a left-handed manner with my right hand. So I'm stitching right to left instead of left to right. So if you're left-handed, just think about using the opposite hand. And now we're going to go up here to that mark. Now it's going to start to look a little more normal. And we're going to come out here and make our cap. We're going to go down on the left, exaggerate it a little bit. We're going to come down to that mark. Make our slightly exaggerated cap to the other side. I'm just holding it out of the way on that bottom side. Now stitch up to my top mark. And put my little cap. Exaggerating to the far side where we go down. I can hold it out of the way. Finish that cap down to the mark. Now making the cap on the bottom. And coming up right next to where we went down. up to that top mark. Make our cap. Come up next to where we went down. Go down on the mark. Make the bottom cap. Come up right, there it is, right next to where we went down. So you can see that even with just those simple spacing differences, height, width, size of the cap, it changes the look of it entirely, but it's really the same exact stitch. And come right up next to where you went down, up to our mark, make our cap. Hold it out of the way if you need to. Down to the mark. And now this next one, well, let's see, let's finish this one first. Let's get that cap on there. And pull that up. Now I'm going to hold it up to where that mark is, but I'm going to, well, and actually that's close enough. We're in the seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and just stitch to that mark, but I don't need to do the cap, so I'm just going to come up a thread away, and I'm going to come down and put the cap on. I'm far enough out in the seam allowance there, I didn't feel like I needed the cap up there. Come up where we went down. Now this one, again, we're going to hold up to our mark, but we're going to stay out here in our seam allowance. And now I want to think, so this is where it can be helpful to have another piece of thread. You can just hold up there to see. And I know I'm going to come up there, so I can feel that. Or you could mark it with your finger or a dot. Use your marking pen. Go down on your mark. And that's going to help keep our angles nice and straight. Now you could always line them up against one another as well. Make my cap. I need to still come up here. I was going to jump right over to the other mark, but I can't quite do that yet. So I'm going to come up. Again, I'm going to line up with that dot up there. Stitch out here in my seam allowance. And you know, you can eyeball it too, you know, where you're coming. I'm trying to think, am I in line? I think I'm pretty close. I think where my stitch is, it's going to be small enough. Even if I'm off a little bit, you're not going to notice it so much. Put the cap on. Now come back up right there where I went down. And there's my mark up there, so I know to stitch there, and that one is done. So that one is our tall and narrow chevron stitch. And see, again, it's just a matter of spacing. How far apart, how close together, how tall, how big are the caps. Let me make a knot, and we'll move on to the next one. So I'm looking back at this and I'm realizing that without putting the caps on, I'm not pulling those threads quite as snug as I would have liked. So watch your tension on that, especially with embroidery floss. The next one, we're going to take and combine these. We're going to start off much the same as we've done. What are we going to mark here? Let's go back to our 1/2 inch spacing. I think let's just keep it simple on this one. Then let's do one that's at a 1/4 inch. So again, I'm going to line up the inch mark with one of my dots. And my 1/4 inch line is this yellow line. So I'm going to mark a line across there. And we're going to come and go halfway in between. So there's that one there. We're going to skip one. And we're going to do the next one. And we're going to skip one and do the next one. All right. And then we're going to make another line, and let's do a 3/4 inch line this time. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm lining up my inch mark. There's the dot. Had to look and see where we were at here. And now I can see where that mark is and where that mark is. And so this next one is going to come in between here. So I'm going to be a 1/2 inch. And we're going to actually skip one and go this one. This would be this one and then this one. And I think that should be right. I'm going to go back to my right-handed method. I'm going to start over here at my seam. I often find that's easiest for me to start there, so I often will do that. And I'm going to come up at my dot. And this time we're going down on that one. So this is going to be a short one. So we're varying the height of them. And I'm going to make that a pretty small cap. And then we're going to go down on this one. And I'm going to make that same small-ish cap on that one. So just like we've been doing, come up there. But this time, we're going all the way up here to that dot. So you've got a tall one alternating with the short one. And I didn't exaggerate that quite enough. There we go. Doesn't take a lot, but it does make a difference. Just allow for that width of thread. And then we're going to go back down here to this one. When I'm saying back down, I'm thinking about where's my base of this one. And so the base of this is along the edge of this seam line. So even though I'm working upside down on this one, now we're going to do a shallow one. And if your marks look a little bit off, you can eyeball it and adjust that to make it look like it's more even. Sometimes we do get it off and it's not exact. Now back down to here. And actually I can pull that one all the way through. Put the cap on. Holding it out of the way so I can see where to come up. Now we're going up to the tall one here. And I'm actually just looking at that thinking I didn't bring that quite out to my line. And to me that's going to be really noticeable, so I'm going to just pull that out and rethread my needle. All right, so I'm going to bring it out and I'm going to just imagine that mark being up here on my line. And then I'm going to put the cap on it. And come up right where I went down to the base, make my cap. Now we're coming up. My lines are fading here, and this one I think I'm definitely off, so I think my center is actually about there. Come up where I went down to the base, put my cap on, exaggerate a little bit to the far side, come up where I went down. Now we're coming out here. Now I'm out in my seam allowance, so I don't need to go all the way. So I'm just stitching into the middle of that. Again, I don't want to come out too close because I don't want to take the risk of trimming my thread off. Just going to bring it up. I don't have to put a cap on. I'm going to go out here. It's just close enough to my seam line here. I'm going to just pop it in. I probably didn't need to do that last one, but it's there in case I need it. But there we just have varied the heights of it. So you can see there's just endless possibilities. So let me knot that one off and then we'll do the last one. For this last stitch, I attempted to film it and apparently didn't get either camera turned on. So I'm stitching it again, so this won't match the finished photo. I'm just going to use my little ruler. I've got my other one somewhere else right now. And I'm just lining up to the ends of my marks to get my straight line. And I'm just drawing right down there with my purple pen. And then we're going to mark this one. This one is going to be a slightly different variation on chevron. And I'm thinking, let's see, we've got 3 inches. Let's do this one at about a 3/4 inch length. And then on this one, we're going to make this one, instead of being centered evenly in the space, we're going to make it asymmetric. So we're going to bring it way off to the side. I'm going to go about 5/8 of an inch on that from each one. So that's actually going to be 3/8 from the previous mark. And we'll go there. This one gives you more interesting possibilities. I think this is the Karen Wildflowers Pearl Cotton. And so I think the size on this is about a 10 or 11, somewhere in there. So we're going to start this the same way that we do all of our other stitches. I'm going to come out, I'm going to put my cap on first, and because I'm starting at the seam, I'm actually putting a half cap. So we're going to put one there, come up right at the seam line as much as I can. Between thread and the seam, it's a little more difficult to get in there. And then we're going to come out to this mark. And so you'll see how this slants away. It's often called slanted. I have called it an angular or asymmetric chevron. I don't see this one done very often. And again, coming right up next to where I went down, finish that cap. Now we're down to the base of it. We're just going over the seam. Put our cap on. So coming to the left, going down on the right, coming up right where I went down. And so you can see the interesting slanted effect that it gets. I do find this one is a little bit better if you exaggerate the angle. When I stitched it the first time, I wasn't quite happy with it, so I was actually glad to restitch this one and do it a little bit shallower and to move this top stitch over slightly because I think it has a better effect. You want it to be noticeable, not for it to look like something is off. Going down. This is that needle I've been using a lot. It's bent and I can feel it. It makes it a little harder sometimes to come up where I think I need to go. Looking at my line, I think it angles in a little bit, so I'm just coming out slightly using my eye, excuse me, using my eye as reference just to judge where I think it should be. I'm going down on the right, coming up where I went down. Now going down at my mark on the top, coming back to make my cap, down on the right. Put that out of the way. And I'm filming this at night, so I apologize if the lighting is not as good as usual. And then I'm going to go down at my mark. This one, because of this seam up here that's so parallel, I'm pretty sure we're going to be tilting that, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch this through here. We're all in the seam allowance, but if I need that to be continuous, I think that will help me. So now we're going to go down. This is right on the seam line, so we'd need at least part of that cap here anyway. I'm going to go down, and again I'm going to follow that through ever so slightly in case as we tilt it we need that. And since I don't have a mark out here, I'm just going to line up parallel with my other thread. I'm going to stay in my seam allowance though, because I'm going to try not to go outside that. I don't want to put it out here and then have to trim that thread when I go to put the blocks together. So I'll turn that over and knot it, but that is an asymmetric, slanted, offset, or angled chevron. I think you get the idea with that. And that gives you, again, more possibilities for interesting embellishments with it. So there is our finished block. I decided to put the template on the block with the new slanted chevron on it. There's a couple of things I want to note on this block. I'm really happy with the way the stitches have turned out, but this seam really bothers me how straight it is to the edge of the block. So what I will be doing with this one is rotating it a little bit. I have to be careful here because I didn't follow that through, and so I don't want to go over that. But I'm thinking something like that. I like that well enough that I'm going to take my friction pen. You know, this is black, it's heat erasable, and I also believe water erasable. And I'm going to mark what I think should be the new edge of that block. I just want to get the idea of where that goes so I don't forget when the time comes to put it together. I do have a little bit of basting in here that will need to come out. I think we're just barely on the line, but down in here. That's not going to be a problem. With these blocks, because they've got the blue on them, I will eventually be getting them damp to remove those lines, and then I'll be ironing the blocks. But you can see, as I've taken that off, how much we've moved that block from this original line. And that's going to be really important. But that's, again, one of the reasons that I've been stitching off into my seam allowance. I'm still within my seam allowance, even with the rotation. Having that turned, I think, makes it a better block. So I just wanted to share that with you. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that when I did this tall, narrow chevron, I pulled a little snug, and when I took it off the frame, you can see how it buckled. Now it stretches right back out, and I'm hoping that that will press out. But watch your tension and don't be pulling too tight when you're doing those really tall, narrow stitches. Let's take a look at the stitches. So we have our basic chevron. We have a short and wide chevron. We have our tall and narrow. And then we have one where we have varied the angle, and then our angled or slanted chevron as well. So I'm pretty happy. These are all very basic chevron stitches. We literally have done exactly the same stitch over and over again. It just matters the height and the width and the length of the caps. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed learning to stitch chevron stitch. It's a simple stitch. It's all straight stitches. And once you get the hang of it, all the rest of the variations come pretty easily. We're going to enjoy playing with this stitch in the next 3 videos. I hope you'll enjoy stitching along with me. Thank you so much for watching. Have a beautiful day. Happy stitching, and I will see you in the next video.